Hi everyone, Dr. Bookmark here, and I'm in my home reading room. Good to see you again, and welcome to the third show in the series, Summer Reading with Your Children. Today's show will consider storytelling, its value, ways to engage your children in storytelling during the summer, and also talk about the critical importance of talk and conversation with your children as you move through the summer with them. You know, it seems like we were born to tell stories. I mean, all cultures, all languages, over and over the centuries, telling and transferring our love of language. Stories transfer knowledge, they transfer values, they transfer tradition, they grow our imagination, they let our spirits soar, and they're fun. It's so much fun. Now, as Dr. Bookmark, I go into the schools all the time. I share books, but I also share stories. Traditional stories, fairy tales, variations of fairy tales. For example, hi everybody. My name is Al T. Wolf, and I'm going to tell you the true story of the Three Little Pigs. So we can tell stories like that, or something that happens at home. One day I was walking down the street and I found a black fuzzy snowball. No, it wasn't a snowball at all. It was a little tiny kitten curled up. It fit in the palm of my hand, and I called the kitten Poe, and I took it home and I raised it. And you know what this cat wanted to do and learn? How I make spaghetti at night. And all the time the cat would watch me making spaghetti. As Shel Silverstein says, spaghetti, spaghetti all over the place, up to my elbows, up to my face. Oh, Poe loved that. And just a story from home that we shared as a family. So great to do. And you know, kids are telling stories all the time. All we have to do is listen in and appreciate them. And talking about listening, I want to introduce, and I'm very excited to introduce my two guests today, two storytellers and educators. And here they are, Ben Mardell, a professor at Lesley College and a storyteller. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you.
And Marina Boney, a storyteller and educator from Boston Public Schools Early Childhood Department. And you know, I failed to mention this, and I really just want to mention this right now. You have been involved for the last year and a half in a project called Boston Listens, which brings story acting and storytelling to pre-K and kindergarten children. And we're going to talk about that, but why don't we start with a round of stories first and then go to Boston Listens?
Sounds good.
Who's going first?
I think I'm up first.
Okay, Ben.
So this is a story of actually how I first started telling stories to young children. And it was back almost 30 years ago, and I was a new teacher in an Alston Brighton Head Start classroom. And great kids, great co-teacher, loved what I was doing, except the group time, the whole group time. 18 kids who I loved, who I got along with really well. When it came to that group time, nobody was paying attention to me. And I was a new teacher, I didn't know how to run those groups. One day, I alternated with my co-teacher. It was my day to tell, to lead the group time, and we had an activity where we put together something we called a story bag. We had scissors in the bag, and a hole puncher, and a stapler, and a piece of paper, and I decided that for the group time I would model how the story bag could work. So I took out the props from the bag and I started telling a story to the kids. Incidentally, and I would not recommend this to a new teacher, I lit a candle as I was telling the story. And so I started to tell the story, and it actually was not a very good story. You know, the hole punch was chasing the stapler, and then the stapler hid under the paper. But I started getting really into it, and I got very animated, and I got a little too animated, and I knocked over the candle. Quickly blew it out, and then I looked up, and all 18 kids were riveted. They were paying attention for the first time all year, and at that point I knew that this was something to the story, because they didn't listen to me, you know, when I was saying this or this, but when it came to telling a story, that's what really captured their attention.
So it brings kids together, the energy, the action of the story. It just brings them right into things.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Marina.
So my story is a story that I just learned recently from someone that came from the UK to tell stories and do storytelling and story acting with us, with our teachers. And it stemmed out of this idea that like a story can be anything, just like you told us some great stories just now in a couple minutes. And I think teachers often think of like very complicated things that they have to tell their kids, and they sort of go out of line. And so I took this story because it's a really simple story, and this is how it goes. Once upon a time, there was a little dog. And she was walking all over a forest, sniffing everywhere, lifting rocks, peeing in the corners, scratching on the ground, looking for truffles. Who knows what she was doing? And suddenly, in the middle of a meadow, she saw a flower. And so she raced toward the flower. And the flower, as he approached, the dog noticed the flower was crying. The dog got really sad and said, "Flower, why are you crying?" Flower said, "I am so thirsty." And the dog wished deeply in her heart for something to take the thirst away from the flower. And suddenly, clouds appeared in the sky, and rain came down. And the flower wasn't thirsty anymore. And that's the end of that story. But you see the simplicity in it.
It's simple, it's beautiful, it has a message, it's magical. It has a magic to it. And I think in stories that come from home, that come from the neighborhood, we begin to tell them, and our imagination takes over a little bit, and a magic is released.
Right.
A magic is released through the story that we might have not anticipated. Now, Boston Listens, this sounds like a fantastic project. Could you talk to me a little bit more about what it is and where it's headed?
Well, it's heading towards the fact that we are about to launch in the early childhood department for the whole district a new kindergarten 2 curriculum. We really wanted to incorporate storytelling and story acting and make it part of the curriculum. So last year, Ben came along to work with us on designing how storytelling and story acting was actually going to happen in our classroom, and we started 2 seminars to pilot the project. So it's really connected to our curriculum, and as you know, to the development of all kinds of skills that we're going to continue to talk more about, but it's really tied into that piece. And it has an element of adults telling stories, meaning teachers and hopefully families and parents, as well as children telling stories and acting them out.
So it's going from a pilot, and it's going to then go to more classrooms in the Boston Public Schools. It's going to be part of the curriculum.
Right. We're going to have, I think it's now 47 out of the 70-some elementary schools are adopting our new K-2 curriculum next year. So ideally, in all of these classrooms, there will be storytelling and story acting happening next year.
So we're right on target here with in the summer talking about storytelling with parents, because if you have a pre-K or kindergarten child, they're going to experience this when they go into school, and it's going to be fantastic for them. I know it's important, but Ben, what kind of research is behind this makes parents say this is a good thing, and teachers, this is a good thing?
Yeah. Well, so there's 3 large areas places where storytelling and story acting support children's learning and helps them succeed in schools. The first is around their language and their literacy, their reading and writing development. And it all stems because, as we've been talking about, storytelling is so engaging for kids, so they're really paying attention. So they're really listening, and they're really attentive, and so they're learning a lot of vocabulary. They're really listening to words, they're thinking about the meaning of words, and when they start to tell stories, they're needing words. So it's a place, I was a child was telling me a story about going to the beach with the people who live next door to him. And he said to me, "What are those people called again?" And I said, "They're your neighbors." And he said, "That's right,
neighbors."
Put them down. Or there's things that adults can do to help build kids' vocabulary. So children may tell stories about a cat and talk about the cat's hair. Yeah. And we could say, well, you could call that fur. And they go, oh yeah, okay. And that, because they're really paying attention and really care, can help develop their language, their vocabulary. At the same time, when you're writing down their story, because it's their words, they are really paying attention, and they're watching that the words go from left to right and top to bottom. And then when they get older in kindergarten age, they're noting the individual words and starting to be curious about, oh, what's that word? Oh, is that my name? Is that, is that, does that say princess? And
Well, I'm hearing a couple things here that, I mean, more than a couple, but I mean, fantastic things. The last thing was ownership. Kids are taking ownership. They're seeing their writing right before them.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing for a learner to know right from the beginning that you own this learning.
Exactly.
You're part of it.
Yeah.
And the other thing about vocabulary is just gigantic. I mean, the study after study after study shows that different groups of children, children that are in poverty, working class children, professional children, they're all children, but they experience a different level of vocabulary around them. And vocabulary is a gigantic predictor of future reading success. And so when you put storytelling and finding the words and growing the vocabulary, this is all the right thing for our kids, all kids, from all groups.
absolutely.
Now, speaking of kids, let's see what the little ones have learned this year about storytelling, because we're using big words and we're talking about everything here because I'm Dr. Bookmark and you're educators. But let's check out what the children have to say and what they learned about storytelling.
Now, this might be a hard story. A hard question. It's a hard question for adults. But maybe you guys, it won't be so hard for you. I don't know.
I'm 5. How old are you? 5. Well, 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds can answer really tricky questions.
Okay, so then let's go for it. What would you say you learn by telling stories or listening to stories or acting them out?
That you shouldn't touch the reel.
Okay, so it's like stage
Just
rules.
we can't just punch in the face just one arm length away. Just don't do this. Don't do this. Well, one arm length away from them, like you pretend punch far away from them, like that, right?
Got it.
Like one day, everybody gets a turn, and because it's fair, so everybody can get turns, because turns are fair to kids. Witches seem to be a popular thing in the school.
What do you learn when you're listening to stories?
I learn about ABCs. I learn about everything. Some stories have words that you can't understand, but some words that you heard from school, and some different words have feelings in them. We learn about dragons and princesses, all those fairy tales that we learn. Most people learn by acting out, and the way they learn that they're not real princesses is just, there are real princesses, and some of their parents said they might be a princess, they might be a king, they might be a prince. Anything they see or they want to be true, it is true, because they are the ones who have the true in it. It's such a funny story. I love it. I never saw that.
Wow, that was terrific. The kids really, they learned a lot. A couple things that I noticed. It seemed like they were talking about some sort of stage situation that was going on,
yeah.
and a fairness. Can you talk a little bit about what that meant?
Ben just talked about the whole idea that all of the sort of stuff that's related to literacy the kids are learning, but of course there's a lot of things that are related to social emotional development. And when kids are talking about stage rules and not touching each other with more than an arm's length, they're really sort of developing their self-regulation skills and their ability to really be careful around each other and their bodies as they're on a stage acting out a story, which takes a lot of self-control. And one of the girls was talking about an issue of fairness, which is a huge social emotional issue for young children and all children. And so they're really, because they take turns telling the stories, because they take turns acting them out the story as you go around the circle, then they're really developing their ability to wait, their ability to really listen to each other. And so it's a big deal around social emotional, but there is a lot around creativity as well that comes about.
The girl who was talking at the end about thinking about, are you a real princess or are there real princesses? Children, their imagination can go wild when they're telling stories, and they can really think about, imagine new possibilities and create their own worlds by themselves and with their friends. And she, I thought, did a really nice job for somebody who is 5, because of course 5 and 6-year-olds can answer tricky questions, but
they can. They can answer hard questions.
Yeah, but really explaining what goes on when she's thinking about what kind of story she wants to tell, and then acting it out with her friends.
I'd like to spend just a second on that, what that little girl said about I can answer tough questions. And I think that goes to the fact that we have to honor that the kids are smart
Absolutely.
and are beyond what we think so often. And so we have to play to their level, which is higher, which is always higher.
Right.
And that little girl kind of reflected it naturally. She had the confidence. So it seems like I'm hearing lots of great things about storytelling. Confidence, imagination building, vocabulary, and also the social emotional things that you talked about, Marina, about regulation and knowing how to play and knowing what's fair.
Right.
All of this in a package of having fun with learning. How can you beat that for little kids
you can't.
or any kids? Or adults even.
Well, that's the thing about storytelling and story acting and play, is that it's so much fun for the adults. It's fun for the teachers, but it's also fun for families.
Well, let's go to families, Ben, for a second. Okay, I'm watching the program tonight, and I want to get started. I know my child may be going into storytelling, but I'm kind of excited now. I want to try it out. What do you recommend parents do?
Ben actually and I had some experiences talking with parents. We went to Parent University in a presentation for families. We participated at the Blackstone Elementary School in their parent event, where they had approximately 70 families come out in the middle of the day to hear about storytelling and story acting.
Well, that is fantastic.
It was I don't think I've ever witnessed that in a public elementary school in the middle of the day. And these parents came out, they heard Ben and I give our spiel, which is kind of what we're doing with you today. And then they wrote stories for their kids. They went into their classroom, they observed the kids acting out their stories, and then they acted out stories for their kids.
The adults, the parents acted out their own stories.
So, it was
the kids must have loved that.
Oh, absolutely, they did.
They were so taken by that.
They did. I mean, and so the lesson is simple. I mean, really, in essence, as our colleague Trish Lee in the UK says, there are 2 things about it. You get a story and you act it out. So it's not like it's really simple what we're asking them to do. Parents can tell stories. They can get their kids to tell them stories. And they can have fun acting them out.
And as Marina's story that she told at the beginning, it doesn't have to be fancy or complicated. I mean, your children are such forgiving audience.
And I think it is so true, because now we're talking about community too, a community of storytellers, which is fantastic in its own right. I'm a parent. And I have kids. They're older now, but I have a memory of what it was like to capture, by listening, a story when my child was 4. I just happened to be walking by his room, and he was in there by himself. And I hear him saying things like, "It's dark. Someone got shot. Superman came. Yeah, Superman came. The moon was out. The moon was out. The man was okay. Everybody was okay. And the dog started barking. And he was like 3 or 4, and I thought, my goodness, he's creating his own story.
Right.
And I think as a parent, it was the first time that I realized all I have to do is hear and listen. And if I listen, I could bring that back to the child later at the right time, or I could have some fun acting it out with the child if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think this is really good stuff. And it's simple stuff. And I like what you said, Marina. It's like, you tell a story, you act it out. It's nothing big.
It's not, yeah.
And it connects with read aloud and independent reading and what I've been talking about. The act of reading in itself is good.
Yes.
There's no right or wrong.
No, there isn't.
It's just good.
And it can be done in any language, right? You can tell your story in Spanish or Cape Verdean Creole or Haitian
All
Creole.
languages.
Any language you speak in your
languages.
home. Right.
Now, as we get near towards the end of the show here, there's lots of good things, of vocabulary and development and all of the things coming out of stories. What other kinds of talk activities at home during the summer should parents key in with their kids?
I mean, I think that having any kind of a conversation with your child, whether you're in the grocery store shopping or whether you're home cooking. I love to cook with my kids, and when they were little, we cooked a lot, talking about ingredients and where they're stored and the kind of things that we need to make certain dishes or setting the table. Any opportunity is an opportunity to be engaged with kids in a conversation, in a dialogue, in telling a story about something.
In cooking, you get recipes, you
Sure,
get ingredients,
absolutely.
you get measurement, you get all kinds of good things.
Right, and I think all those things, story and conversation, go together. So you're cooking, and this is the way that my grandmother used to make. And kids love hearing about when you were little kid, about the first time you learned how to ride a bike, or your favorite food when you were little, or the time that something scary happened to you.
Again, what you're talking about is unlocking the memories.
Yeah.
And somehow you get into a conversation with your child, and you didn't anticipate it, and you unlock these memories that you can share and that you can talk about. Right. So it's sort of just narrate the day.
Right.
Talk about what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the key thing in my mind is that during those moments, to turn off the radio and to talk, or to turn off the TV, or not to be on the cell phone when we're walking to the bus or being on the bus, but to interact. And those interactions are what children yearn for, and they want to be close to you, and that then is what is going to help them in their development and being ready for school.
And we talked on the first couple shows about this balance. We know the technology's out there and everything like that, but you control the technology. And we talked about this wonderful space that opens up when you turn things off. I found at home that the night opens up into this space where you can create if you just turn some things off and just enjoy each other's company and begin to tell stories. Well, this has been fantastic. I want to thank you,
thank you for having
us.
being on the
us,
show.
yeah.
And I look forward to coming out as Dr. Bookmark to see the children tell their stories, to see the story acting, to pick up a couple pointers, to put into my own little act, and and just grow as a storyteller myself. Any final thoughts?
I think stories hold memories, and it's important to think about how they are traditionally in our families. It's important that you said that about it. Stories and memories being something that becomes part of what makes a family
cohesive,
yeah.
Ben?
And when we're talking about young children, this is such a special age that kids are going to grow up, they're going to tell more realistic stories, their stories won't be as fanciful. To really enjoy and appreciate the magical and fanciful nature of 3, 4, and 5-year-old stories. It may not be organized the way the adult story would be organized. Strange things may happen, but that's the pleasure of really listening.
Just embrace it.
Exactly.
Just accept it.
Just
Just enjoy the talk of your children. Parents, I hope you enjoyed tonight's show and you picked up a couple pointers about storytelling with your children. It's part of a package: read aloud, independent reading, telling stories, talking, narrating the day. All of these things develop the oral language of your child. And that oral language development is so crucial in the development of strong reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. And what's so amazing about it, from preschool through elementary school, it can be fun. It can be enjoyable. It can be magical, and it can open up worlds that you thought were closed for a long time suddenly appear again. So please enjoy, sit around now, tell each other a story, and I'm going to put all the information about Boston Listens up on my website, drbookmark.com, and that's just drbookmark.com, and it'll all be there for you to check out, and I hope to see you in our last show next week which will be about how you can support writing at home. But for now, you've got the fever to tell stories. I've got the fever to tell stories. Ben and Marina have the fever to tell stories. So on 3, 1, 2, 3. I love to tell stories.